Cops.
Yeah, now I gotta go on mute. Let's see. RC, we should be live on FF Metrics.
Not showing yet. Oh. Yep, looks like we got it.
Awesome. Can people in the chat let us know if you can hear us?
Yes, a new look chat.
There we go.
Ross.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
We got one person watching.
Ross,
it's a success.
Can you hear Chris and RC? All right, perfect. Well,
does everybody sound good? Let us know if anybody sounds off.
Well, I was on mute, so I can talk. I can speak now. So.
All right. Well, for today's show, guys, we're going to just walk through the DraftKings betting menu. But before we do that, Chris, RC, do you guys want to talk about some of the bets you made and share that with the audience, what you're most excited about for Thursday?
Before we jump in with that, I'm curious. Chris, have you bet this heavily? Do you have a lot of bets going for this draft?
Yeah, to get ready for the show, I kind of was scrolling through my FanDuel and DraftKings and MGM, and as I got through all of them, I realized there's a decent amount of bets that I put in, yeah.
Andrew, we can hear your keyboard louder than
my bad.
Than Chris.
He's a powerful typewriter.
He had to save.
Do you have the mic?
Save the day.
Do you have the mic on your desk, huh?
I do. I'll put it on mute while I type, though.
No, yeah, it really does come through clear. So here's my thing. I think you guys know my story, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. I would say 5 days ago, if you just gave me a multiple choice for the players in this draft and tried to either match them to their position or to their college, I might have gotten Andrew's at it again, pecking away.
It's super loud.
Oh, that's crazy. I muted my mic, so it must be picking up my laptop mic too. Okay. Yeah, I'll stop. Go ahead.
But still putting in bets because obviously I'm reading what RC writes. I'm listening to Ross's opinion and looking at his mock and Xavier's mock. And so the ramp up over the last 5 days has been really to listen to podcasts, read your stuff, put everything together and see if there's opportunities for bets. And, I guess just based on my personality, that resulted in a decent amount of bets.
I only have a handful at this point. I don't love betting the draft, but I want to. I'm finding myself adding bets here, there, and everywhere, more for fun. But I'll throw the first question to you on this betting. Do you have one of all of the ones that you have? What's the one? Let's say what's the one you've got the most money on? What's the one you're most confident in?
Well, there's two that I wound up having the most money on, and I guess I could tell you the story about why. And as I listen to shows this week, you hear people talking about the bets they have where the odds have moved, and I think it's interesting to hear what people got in on, but obviously it doesn't help the audience, but there's plenty of things I think that we can talk about tonight that will help the audience. So the two that I feel the best about, one is for all to be the first offensive lineman drafted, and the odds I have on that are minus 250. And you might recall, RC, it was a chat with me, you and Ross, where I was kind of, talking about, what are the odds that he's the first offensive lineman taken, because you guys were speaking so glowingly about him, seemed like there was a bit of a gap between the next person. And, I think you can put it into a percentage and then determine whether you have odds at the current price. And Ross said something in the 90s. So he was very confident that Alt was going to be the first offensive lineman drafted. And still, none of these things are 100%. But if you have a 90% chance of something happening and the odds are minus 250, that's pricing a 60-something% probability that it happens. So all that difference is your value in the bet. And now you see he's minus 600 and growing to be the first offensive lineman as the mock drafts become more unified and we get closer to the date where people really feel like that's coming into focus. So that's one, and I hit that a few times. I did it a few times across the FanDuel and MGM and kind of did it at different places. So I'm pleased with that one, even though it's minus odds. And then the other one, again, I didn't run out and bet every single thing that Ross said, but he's someone that I really trust when it comes to this stuff. And his commentary in the mock draft when he said Jaden Daniels number 2, he said you can write this in ink. And as I listened to others out there talk about even this past week, although I made these bets a while ago. So I have Jaden Daniels to go second overall, as good as plus 155 and as low as minus 125, which again, those odds have run away and they're gone. But even this week, I heard shows where people were saying they want their bet was Drake May to go second overall because they feel like it's 50-50. So why not take the plus 175 or plus 200? But the odds then after those shows were recorded really ran away. So, I think that it's important to try to figure out if what you're doing is on the solid foundation or it's just you're being drawn to plus odds and chances that things can happen. There are chances that a lot of things can happen, but how do you quantify those odds and figure out if you're making a good bet?
I wish I would have considered that more when I was looking through the NFL draft bets. I was looking to be a hero, wanting to not be surprised that, I'm sure Alt is going to be the first offensive lineman, but it wouldn't shock me if the guy at Oregon State, if the Chargers are sitting at 5 and can't trade back. It would not shock me, but I would not bet on it, or say it's going to happen over Alt. Maybe the odds would be fantastic to try to bet it, but when I've looked at it and see the greatest odds to take the chance, but that's like a long shot. Alt seems to be the safe money. I should have played that to be safe. I did things like Neighbors to be picked ahead of Harrison for plus odds. I did a couple parlays that they have set up in DraftKings where it lays out 1, 2, 3, 4, and I felt like I was at the OTB. I felt like I was betting horses. I wanted to box the first 4 picks, but I did a number of heavy plus odds of the 3 quarterbacks and then Neighbors 4th. So if Neighbors goes 4th and Harrison doesn't go before him, it's going to be a happy day for me. But that was more throwing darts at the plus odds. I like your sound thinking. I should have considered that instead of trying to be a hero. Now, if I'm a hero Thursday, I'm going to be loving life because the odds on them are pretty good. But I like both the logic of your bets.
Well, and I will say this: this is coming off the heels of last year, which a lot of people who had draft success for years in a row lost last year during the draft. And I was stuck at a dinner that I had to attend. It was actually at Encore Casino in Boston. So I thought, okay, once I get out of here, at least I can watch some screens and be at a casino. But it went long, and they were doing an auction, and they wouldn't end, and the draft started. So I was looking at my phone and realizing things were not going the way that everyone expected. And I expected to have lost the draft, and I was bailed out by the dumbest luck ever. If you recall last year, some of the discussion we were having, again, I'm going to go back to Ross because I respect, his opinion a great deal. He was talking about the idea that maybe Bijan Robinson would go to the Lions. You remember that? Mm-hmm. And so I
told him he was crazy. Yes.
And so as one of the bets that I put in, it was, so anyway, get out of there. I'm expecting to take a bath, and I look, and my DraftKings account has more in it than I started with, more than I expected. And the bet that did it that I forgot about was because of the Bijan to Detroit idea, we also put, I think it was 50-1 for the first pick of the Lions to be a running back. So sure enough, they trade down, and then they take Gibbs. So completely not what I was betting, just got totally lucked out. So that made me think, well, two things. One, your idea of taking the longer shots, you only have to hit one or two to get there. That's really my philosophy on on betting most things. I like to take those plus odds versus grinding it out game to game minus 110, picking it against the spread. But in this case, in the draft, I think if you could do both, but if you have a sound logic, I'll give you an example. I was reading, so I had put, I'll tell you one more bet that I made that's still out there that people can consider. And it's the position of the Bills' first pick. And my thought was, because wide receiver is the favorite, and it's minus 250. So I think that everyone thinks the Bills, who are not in the first round, but I did hear they're trying to get into the first round to pick a receiver. So I thought minus 250, that equates to an NFL favorite of minus 6.5. So a little less than a touchdown. And so my thinking was, if you bet a favorite of 6.5 on the money line, you're likely to win. You're more likely to win than lose, but of course you're laying 250. But, we could go through, Andrew can search his database and say how many 6.5 point underdogs won the game outright, and so my thought was that is going to happen more often than the Bills are going to wind up with a non-receiver. And the catalyst for it really is trading Diggs. Because I did read an article, guys, that it was someone having the opposite thought on the Bills, saying they're so far down the board that you don't know what's going to happen. Receivers can go on a run. So he took a shot at defensive line and corner, I think, and both at pretty big plus odds, thinking if you get one or the other. My problem with the way that with his strategy there is, even if they don't go receiver, you still might not have hit the position, so you're not going to win. Mm-hmm. And the likelihood, I want to be aligned with the team. The Bills, if they can, are drafting a receiver first, I believe,
in a draft that has the most massive pool of wide receiver talent, going from first round right into the second round. So they don't necessarily have to move up. I don't know, when is their second round pick? Is it their natural one, or do they have?
I think they have the Vikings second rounder, which should be in the 40s.
Yeah, they're kind of a third of the way into the second round, somewhere in that range. It's not their pick, so it's striking distance to get to the bottom of the first. That's the range that they're in. So
they're in that range if they're stuck there. So yeah. I think you win it if they don't move up.
Well, and you guys know, I know I've been doing a lot of talking. I'll shut up for a second, but I feel like the most conviction that I get is when I hear something that I disagree with. So I was reading an article of someone that I respect, but what the example they gave to justify these longer odds on the Bills was the Giants were a very wide receiver needy team last year, and they went with a couple of different positions and then eventually got to wide receiver. And where I would object to that, and again, Ross is in the chat, but I don't see the chat at the moment. It more times than not, it really is straight line thinking when a team loses a key player at a position, they go out and draft that position, and even though there's so many times where, I mean, just random examples that pop in my mind. When Moss left the Vikings, they had the top 10 pick, and they took was it Williamson, the really speedy receiver who didn't amount to much.
That narrows it down.
When they seriously, but even when they, I mean, the one that did work
they took
out,
Xavier Worthy.
No,
in the past.
Ross is going to put it in the chat. He was like a guy out of South Carolina, super speedy, not really that productive, and he was
not Rice, not Sidney Rice.
He
was Seattle. Williamson is the guy. I can't think of his first name right now.
Yeah, he really that really broke my heart when they picked him. And even though when the Vikings lost, when they traded Diggs, now of course it worked out great, but they picked Jefferson. When San Fran lost. The guy that went to Indianapolis, the defensive lineman, they replaced him with Kinlaw, and that didn't work
Buckner.
out. Buckner.
When the Titans traded A.J. Brown, they got the great Treylon Burks.
Yeah.
Guys, I'm not even someone that digs really deep into this stuff. It just seems like more times than not, it just occurred to me that these teams do replace the player that they just lost. It's why we can get to talking about it. But when I look at the Bengals, there's a lot of different ways you could see the Bengals going. But if there's a nice defensive tackle on the board for the Bengals, I think that they would be likely to pick a person after losing DJ Reader. I think that that's one of the things that I look at that might seem too simple, but I can think of examples, and I didn't even really do research on it.
Yeah. Well, guys,
Ross is saying that the Bills have picks 28 and 60.
Yeah, I think I must have confused the 2024 and 2025 second rounders in that Diggs trade, so it must be the Vikings 2025 that they have from Houston. But
yeah, it is.
Let's dive into the draft odds pick by pick. So starting with the number 1 overall pick, Caleb Williams is by and large a huge favorite here, minus 20,000. I think it's a foregone conclusion here. Are we thinking anyone other than Caleb, or should we just move on to pick number 2?
Just move on.
I think we move on. The only thing I'll note is that I don't want to just come on and talk about, when you're betting early, you're going to have some things that don't work out. And I do have one small bet on who's this guy that's going to go second? Daniels. Jaden Daniels. I have him on to go first early on when we were thinking there might be some weakness there. So that one's not going to come in, but I think it's well worth having all the Jaden Daniels second to eat that one. But no, I think the odds are running away. The Bears literally have had dinner with Caleb Williams and talked about install. So that's just.
Yeah.
No one's debating that at this point. It goes on, as I said before, to the second pick where I heard people talking and trying to make a case. Adam Schefter for number 2 here. He said on a Commanders podcast, get your Jaden Daniels jersey. So I think that I look at this and say Ross was on this one, because when he wrote in his mock draft, put this in ink, there were a lot of people. There weren't many people saying it with that conviction.
Yeah,
there's been a lot of hoopla this week of Jaden Daniels camp being upset that they were brought in, that the quarterbacks were brought in as a group, and I think the odds may have dipped a little bit, but that seems to be straightening itself out. If Daniels is either going to get picked by Washington, or if they've really ticked them off and Washington's in a bind, I think they will then look to trade the pick. I mean, if it's a real issue, I think they would then trade the pick to somebody who would take Jaden Daniels.
Yeah. And I kind of don't understand why it would be an issue. And I also recognize that the league wants there to be intrigue. They don't want the picks tipped on X. They don't want this to be a foregone conclusion. So I think anyone that's trying to stir up any controversy here might be doing the bidding for the NFL from a media standpoint and just trying to, because they know they can't shake anybody off Caleb Williams, but you have to put some uncertainty out there. But I mean, you have Ross and Adam Schefter lined up, so I don't really need to worry about what anybody else has to say. I'm assuming Xavier's there too. So
yeah,
and I'm playing it. I'm playing that obvious 1-2 in the draft pick parlays. If you look at the draft pick parlays, they give you there's a top 4 order, top 3 order. So I took Caleb Williams with Jaden Daniels. Then for my 3-4, I did May Neighbors, and then I also took McCarthy Neighbors as 3-4 options. And they're all those two bets are. Let's see the odds right now. If you put May 3rd and Neighbors 4th, it's plus 3,000. If you think if it's going to be May Harrison, that's the number one way they think it's going to go. It's minus 145. But if you insert Neighbors versus May or Neighbors versus Harrison, it goes up to plus 3,000. And then I took a shot at that order, Williams, Daniels, and then J.J. McCarthy, then Neighbors, and that's plus showing plus 6,500 now. I got it at I think 7,500 or 8,000 a couple days ago. So that's the route I'm taking.
Yeah,
banking on that 1-2 going that way.
And
I think that the odds got a little friskier when the whole Daniels Commanders thing dust up happened. So the odds look lower than where I bet them a couple days ago, but they're still pretty healthy. But that's all banking on Neighbors going for.
And for the audience members that don't know, on FanDuel you could go and actually bet the order of the top 4 picks. That's what RC was just talking about now. So betting the order 1, 2, Caleb and Jaden Daniels.
On DraftKings.
On DraftKings too, I guess that okay. I didn't see it here. I don't know if we can pull it up. If you can guide me to
draft pick parlays up at the top.
There we go.
And then top 4 and top perfect. 3 order. I looked at I went with the top 4 just to stretch the odds out.
Yeah. So the big stretch there in that is Neighbors going 4 overall, which, I mean, the consensus is Harrison, and that's why you're getting paid out on it. But it's not impossible. It could definitely happen.
I don't know if I'm going to get. I'm more confident that Neighbors is going 4th than I am May is going 3rd. Xavier joined the chat. Xavier's saying that he had Williams, Daniels, May since his first mock draft in January. I'm interested to see, as I can't remember, Xavier, who's going number 4? So says you, or do you not want to reveal that yet? Because they're professional entries into the contests are not due till tomorrow.
I mean, Neighbors is plus 1,800 at 4 too. I mean, that in itself is a nice little payout. But I guess before getting to 4 though, let's go back to let's go in order. Number 3. So I think it's a foregone conclusion. Chris is wearing a Pat sweater, I don't know if he's still wearing it. I can't.
Oh yeah.
So Patriots fan.
Do we know?
I'm going to change into a Viking sweater when we get later into the draft. When we get to
you really jumped on the Patriots bandwagon at the wrong time.
So
if you're looking for alternatives to the Vikings, you went the wrong direction.
What are we thinking here with the number 3 pick? Do we think that it's gonna the betting favorites May obviously at -300, but McCarthy's a +400 here. Do we think there's any shot that McCarthy can go over May there?
I entertained the idea just from the angle, the greatest success that the Crafts ever had was a Michigan quarterback who many times over made their franchise more valuable. So I thought that kind of thing might, if it was close, that might be something that would. But as I bounce it off of Patriot fans, they really feel like, the upside of May, the fact that May was considered to be a top quarterback for a longer period of time, and McCarthy just kind of came on the scene, and he's seen as someone who didn't really produce, a game manager type. So I think that I don't necessarily think that that's the worst thing in the world in New England. They have a pretty good defense. It's kind of the way the team is built. But everyone seems to think and hope that it's May. When I talk to Patriot fans, so they're not experts or piped in, but that's the fan base really is hoping for. Well, they're hoping May goes second and they get Jaden Daniels, but if it goes Daniels second, they want May.
Yeah, this one's interesting to me because I could see the Michigan angle. Jonathan Kraft, just remembering Brady being a Michigan man and JJ McCarthy stepping in, taking over the reins. But also, Drake May is not going to be ready from like day one. So does that stop them from going May potentially? But he's regarded to have a really high ceiling. It's just I don't know that the Patriots system, their offense, is going to be the one to foster him and help him reach his true potential. So that's what makes me a little.
But they don't think that. It's the May upside. It's the May not ready and upside that I think attracts them to May over McCarthy, because that team. I'm sure they think well of themselves, but I can't believe they think that they're Super Bowl contenders or division threats unless mass injury hits. And they like Jacoby Brissett, fine, but they're going to need a quarterback for the future. Or do they think they're going to ever be drafting up this high again when they're not used to being there? Is this their shot at getting a developmental quarterback when everybody says these guys need to sit for a year? If you're gonna take a developmental, if you're gonna take a swing at the fences on one of these quarterbacks that you're more than willing to wait a year for, I would think anybody in that position that boxes themselves into making a quarterback decision is going to take May over McCarthy.
Yeah, fair point.
For the future upside. I mean, that's just the way I'm looking at it. What the NFL ends up doing is nothing would surprise me. Nothing would surprise me from them thinking, we'll take another Michigan guy, to them thinking we're division winners, with our defense and our new head coach, and it's going to be so wonderful. I mean, teams are delusional, but I would think May would be the smarter pick of the two. But in my four parlay, I took one with May and one with McCarthy.
Yeah, and I think what you said really resonated with me. The fact that even though we think that the Pats offense is bad and not the best place for May, the Pats aren't going to have that mindset. They're going to see somebody with a high ceiling and think that, someone like Brissett can prepare him. Maybe Brissett, they view him as their version of Alex Smith, and that's probably their mindset going into it. But
I think for sure they're thinking Brissett plays half the season and May, plays when he's ready. Nobody thinks a quarterback needs, to start in year two, but maybe that's what they learn as they go. I have a little bit of McCarthy plus 400 something to go third from back when the Vikings made the move to get a second first round pick. I thought if they trade up, now McCarthy's in play. So just a little bit there at 4-1, to kind of as a hedge. I don't actually have a lot on the third pick. I do have some May and I do have some McCarthy. So either one of those, I'm okay with, but neither one of them makes my night.
Yeah. Well, let's go to pick 4 because I think this is where things could potentially get a little more crazy. I think top 3 picks are almost a lock to be QB. But at 4, Arizona holds the pick. And last year they had a similar draft position. I think they were 3, but they traded down. They might do the same this time around. Or they can do what the consensus thinks they're going to do and take Marvin Harrison Jr., who the mainstream thinks is the best receiver on the board. I know RC probably has a different opinion on that. Guys, there's a lot. If you're not going Marvin Harrison, there's a lot you can potentially do with this 4th overall pick. Obviously, another option is Vikings trading up and getting McCarthy, which I think everyone. I don't know that we're going to see 4 quarterbacks go back to back. I don't think that's ever happened before. So, what do you guys think? Is there something other than Marvin Harrison Jr. that you would feel comfortable betting here?
I don't know what you just said. I did because I was half listening because I had to verify my DraftKings to bet number 4 to make sure that I had it. $5 on Neighbors at plus 1,800.
Okay.
So I'm not sure what you said, but that's my take on what you may have said.
Well,
I think unlike the other 3 positions, just the fact that Arizona traded down last year for a haul of picks, and the idea that there are people that want to come up potentially for a quarterback. Obviously, Andrew, you were asking the question, but this is the most unsure position because there could be a trade. I'm not necessarily, unless I get really paid a lot for taking the risk, I don't want to bet on a trade happening. So you're not really getting that much at 4, I don't think, to bet McCarthy, because I think it's sort of anticipated.
yeah.
I thought it was interesting that I heard that C.J. Stroud was quoted as saying, if Marvin Harrison is staring you in the face, don't be dumb, draft him.
I saw that
so
too.
I think that, that helps. When you think about, I think that it seems like the Arizona GM, he was profiled when being on the phone for the trade down. So he seems to be a guy who has a good deal of confidence. But I still think the best way to handle this with these guys is to bet on them making the most risk-averse decision. Just because we think it's a good idea to stick your neck out, don't think that these guys are going to. Washington's GM's a first-time GM. You can bet on him making the safest pick, the most expected pick. And, if Marvin Harrison winds up not being good, no one's going to look at the GM and point and laugh and say, haha, you drafted Marvin Harrison. It's just never going to happen. You're completely, from that perspective, you're safe in making that pick. So I think betting on people to make the most cowardly move is going to be the most profitable. But I don't have anything for number 4. I really don't. It kind of skips a little while for me. I'm interested in what happens here, but I don't have conviction enough to make any bets.
I'm trying to will it into existence that it's going to be Neighbors over Harrison. I really want that to happen beyond the bets that I have on it. But what I'm thinking in my little daydream delusional head is Caleb 1, Daniels is the obvious number 2. The Patriots are going to be backed into a corner when they have that high of a pick, and if they don't trade out, and I don't think anybody wants to trade. If the Patriots make that pick at 3, meaning they don't trade it, they can't trade it. Part of the story will be they can't trade. They don't get enough reason they don't get enough in exchange to even make the move. So they get backed into a corner and they take Drake May. So 1, 2, 3. Now we're at Arizona. I don't think in my little pretend world in my head, I don't think there's a team in the NFL that has any motivation to move up that high to try to get JJ McCarthy. I don't think he's worth it. I don't think anybody sees him as the kind of guy you will trade up that high to get. So, and if the Patriots, I could see teams trading into number 3 to go after May for the upside. But if Arizona's stuck with that 4, and they've said, that they're open for business to trade it, if they're stuck at 4 and they're out there talking about willingness to trade, and I know that can be a general thing that you have to say, but I haven't seen Arizona give strong overtures like I would think that they wouldn't be run if they knew that they were going to take Marvin Harrison. And it's such a strong odds that that's going to be the pick at 4. I don't think anybody's going to take Harrison at 3. But if they know that he's going to be there at 4, if you assume quarterback 1, 2, 3, Arizona, I would think, would shut their mouth and not be talking about we're open for business.
Right.
The fact that they're running around talking about how they're open for business, and that the Chargers have been, in the mix to trade back, I'm just thinking at 4 and 5, there may not be as much heat for Marvin Harrison as we think. We know through the league that it's kind of a split on Neighbors over Harrison, Harrison over Neighbors. So it's not like it's not like it's 32 teams at a 32 would go Harrison there. There's a split. There's a crack in the whole Harrison's the untouchable, got to be drafted at the top. If Arizona can't trade out of that pick because nobody's going to give draft capital to get J.J. McCarthy, and they're stuck with the pick, I think there is a close to 50-50 chance that they're going to end up picking Neighbors. I think there's enough there's enough spin that's gone out that a lot of GMs have Neighbors above Harrison. So it's not like if Chicago, shockingly took Drake May number 1, Chicago would burn to the ground again for a second time because everybody's so convinced Caleb Williams is above it all. But I don't think within the NFL the talk has been Neighbors right up there with Harrison. So if you assume Arizona's going to be stuck making that pick and that they're going to go wide receiver, I think it's a 50-50 chance they go Neighbors. But the odds are Harrison, minus 225 and Neighbors plus 1,800.
Odds
so I'm willing
certainly
to take
don't say that.
Yeah, I'm willing to take a lottery ticket chance that Neighbors does end up going 4th.
Yeah.
That one's not me willing that into existence against all odds because it's such a foregone conclusion. Everybody knows it's going to be or everybody has Harrison rated number 1 wide receiver on their board in the NFL. That's not true. That's not the case. That has been out in the news plenty. So I just think for the odds, I like the bets on Neighbors to go 4, that Arizona can't get out of that spot and has to make a pick and ends up going with Neighbors there.
Yeah, and the other thing is too, RC, you talked about people not wanting to trade up to JJ McCarthy, but I could see the Bears at 9 getting suckered into trading up to 4 to get Marvin. I could see the Colts. The Colts, right, at 15, they've been rumored to trade up too. I mean, both, and there's that connection with the head coaches with the Colts and the Cardinals. They're both on the Eagles staff, so maybe there could be something in the works there. But it's kind of hard to bet on something like that. But I'm totally with you in that the spread between Harrison and Neighbors isn't reflected appropriately on the odds. It shouldn't be minus 225 plus 1800. That plus 1800, even if you don't assume it's 50-50, it should probably be a lot closer to like somewhere in between McCarthy and May as opposed to plus 18.
And then let's go back to Chris's theory that the team that moves something will typically turn around and draft the replacement. Well, Arizona moved Marquise Brown. So if you know that they're going for a wide receiver, which they can fall back and get wide receivers. If I was the GM of Arizona, I would definitely be trading out of this somehow, some way. I just don't know who's trading up into it, but I will stick with my theory from months ago, and I wish I could bet it, but I don't. They never have it out there of matching Harrison to Indianapolis. I still think that is that would not shock me at all. And the fact that nobody's going to trade up for J.J. McCarthy to 4 in my head, and Arizona's going to then reduce their price if they see more value in backing down and taking some of the other wide receivers and picking up picks to do it. May not be as anywhere near what they were asking, but they do it. I could see the Colts or the Bears sneaking their way up there and blowing up my whole betting strategy. But if Arizona is stuck with that pick, or when I say stuck, it may be that they're like, hey, we do need a wide receiver, but it's really Neighbors and Harrison and then everybody else. So we got to pick between the two. We have to make this pick and live with it. Maybe we should take the guy that we have number 1 on our board, and that there is clearance from the analysts that say Neighbors is right up there or above Harrison.
I mean, Ross made a good point in the chat, RC. He doesn't think it's likely that Indy can go up into the top 5. Like, they might not have enough draft cap, but they could overpay theoretically, right? Like,
my theory would be on a total Jim Irsay caffeinated or greater high, and forces Chris Ballard to do this.
Yeah,
and it could be a situation where I think Ross was saying, to the risk-averse GM things. I looked at the comments, but I had to shut them off because I was getting an echo. But there's nothing GMs get praised for more than trading down. It's, they had a whole segment on Ossendorf and the great success his first draft was because he traded down. So he might even take less to get out of 4, knowing that he's going to get, I don't think all the way down to Indy, but he could take less if they really do want Neighbors. You trade down, you get all the PR and love for trading down, and then you get the guy you actually want. Because you're not going to get love from the media taking Neighbors at 4. That is sticking your neck out, even though it's the right thing to do, based on your scouting. So it could happen, but yeah, I agree with what Andrew said before. It's not 50-50. It's probably like a, 70-30 chance, but a 30% chance or a 25% chance on something, 20% chance on something that's paying 18-1 is a good bet.
Yeah.
It's not something that's being discussed. That's a thought that, I haven't heard people talking about anyone, other shows I listen to, they're talking about it's Harrison generational, and that's the end of the sentence. The other guys are
it's Harrison generational, and then they'll turn around and talk about how great Neighbors is and how a lot of people have him over them. And then this makes me stop and go, how can Harrison be generational or one of a kind? I hear a lot of he's one of a kind. Like, he's one of a kind, and then people are arguing Neighbors over him in the league. I can't remember who said it of credibility note. It was somebody, Rappaport, somebody is like, polling the GMs, there's more people with Neighbors ahead of Harrison on the draft board.
That's
so
crazy.
He can't be generational or one of a kind. But that aside,
I thought his name alone would just propel him like way
Yeah.
above Neighbors, but I mean that's interesting to hear that the NFL GMs are split on that.
And can I say one other thing? If
Go
I
for
was
it.
an NFL GM, I would totally avoid Marvin Harrison. I mean, unless I was convinced he was the greatest wide receiver prospect in the history of football. I don't want any of these. I don't want any player who, now we're getting into these legacy players, son of whoever. I don't want any legacy offspring player that has been totally coddled and have the helicopter dad over the top of their career, like two players. Like, I wouldn't want Marvin Harrison Jr. because you're getting you're getting some LeVar Ball vibes of, now you have to deal with the Hall of Fame dad critiquing how many targets your son got and how they're not using them right, or so I would be leery of that on top of everything else with Marvin Harrison. But you couldn't pay me enough money to take Shador Sanders next year. I would not want Deion Sanders being LeVar Ball, NFL style, talking about everything that I'm doing wrong with his son. So I feel like that is going to happen with Marvin Harrison Jr. too. But all that being said, I made myself a note a couple years ago in a reminder, and I have it pop up every day for the month of April, that says the NFL draft teams do exactly what they are supposed to do, the way that the media wave is going. So I'm sure this is going to be Marvin Harrison at 4, but I do think there is a fighting chance that this is going to be Neighbors.
Yeah. Well said, RC. Let's go to pick number 5, where the Chargers currently have this pick, and they need a receiver too, but Jim Harbaugh, he seems to be prioritizing other, like in the past, if you just look at his teams, he likes having a good offensive line, having good tight ends. So a lot of mocks have the Chargers trading down here, but if they stay at this pick, is it going to be Neighbors or Harrison, whoever doesn't get taken at 4? Or does Joe Alt, who's priced at plus 425, have a real shot of going 5 overall?
What are the odds here? I'm just looking at that. So the Neighbors odds here are what, plus 260?
Plus 260 for Neighbors. Harrison's
I
the
should
same.
probably take a hedge out on that, on my number 4.
Yeah. Harrison's close to that too. Alt at plus 425, but I really can't see, other than those 3, and obviously someone trading up to take McCarthy at 5. Like, I don't see anybody outside of this top 4 really pushing this group right here. It seems like it's going to be one of those guys.
The Arizona, to Chris's theory earlier on what teams got rid of, they're going to be looking to replace. That fits Arizona. That also fits the Chargers. The offset to the Chargers thing is you got Jim Harbaugh, and you don't know what the hell he's going to do. And I wouldn't think, with all these offensive linemen sitting there, he's going to take a wide receiver when he's not a big passing game guy. Not that he doesn't need wide receivers to throw to, but I'm curious if Arizona did take Neighbors, what Jim Harbaugh would really do, because he's faced Harrison a couple years. He has the tape. He knows what Marvin Harrison Sr. is going to be involved with the program. He's going to see all of these things. If the Chargers are all of a sudden in the Marvin Harrison spot and they pass on him, in my little fantasy world, it's Neighbors 4, and then the Chargers pick an offensive lineman at 5, and that thus the Marvin Harrison slide begins, and panic will hit the streets, and chaos will reign as everybody's freaking out that Marvin Harrison dropped from 4 to 6 or 4 to 7. That will be, if I see that scenario, if I see Neighbors go 4 and Harrison not go 5 because the Chargers want to go with an offensive lineman, my whole draft night is going to be made. I'm going to be the happiest person in the world if that scenario works out. I want to see the Chargers be in a position to not take Marvin Harrison because they have a lot of information on field facing him, and they look at the big picture and they pass on him. That would be the joy that would hit my heart on Thursday night. Would be I could not hide it.
And just a big picture, if you look at the Chargers, say they take Alt, right? They'll have Slater on one side and then Alt on the other. Like that, those are pretty two good tackles right there. I mean, that shores up, that will like give Herbert more time. And this draft is so deep that in the second and third rounds, they could probably get a first round talent at receiver to help shore up, obviously Keenan left, Mike Williams left, lots of areas where they could address on their skill position. Chris, what are your thoughts on 5? Do you have any strong reads here?
I don't think it would be to give Herbert more time because he doesn't need that much time to hand the ball off. I think that bringing in Greg Roman, excuse me, they want to build a line. So I think that's reasonable, but I don't have any more specific slots for a player because I haven't seen this bet. I don't think it exists, but if the bet was, will the top 5 teams that are currently in the top 5 all make those picks, I would bet no, they're not. So I don't expect all of these teams to be making these picks, and so that introduces so much uncertainty that even if I knew these 5 were making the picks, I don't know who the players would be because you don't see Alt mocked to the Chargers in a lot of places. I don't know if I've seen that at all. It makes sense to me. It's logical, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
So at this point, I think I'm more interested, and I heard people talking about a bet. Marvin Harrison's over-under was 4.5, and it was juiced to the under. And they took a flyer at plus 200 something on the over, and I would have liked a shot at that bet, but that was in Vegas. I think they were betting it at Circa, and I didn't see it on DraftKings, FanDuel, MGM, anywhere, or else I would have really liked to have added that to my list. So at this point, I think that my strategy has shifted to over-unders for players. So pick by pick, I feel like I don't have all that much to offer because everything I hear is making sense, and so does the previous, most recent mocks that both Xavier and Ross had. No ideas don't make sense to me here, but I think, as I said, I shifted to over-under. Dallas Turner over his draft position, Latu under. So as we get down the first round, those are the kinds of ways that I was playing this stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
But Chris, do you want to transition to looking at that draft position page then from here, now that we're past the first 5 picks?
Well, I
or
think
Andrew,
that,
you want to look at the
I can bring that
draft
up.
position page?
Yeah, if there's something else that you guys that's interesting in as you move into the first 5, but now you get into, I think, some interesting numbers. I mean, it's really heavily juiced, but Alt's number was 7.5, and things could have changed between. Really everything I have in my notes here is from late last night. I checked it again this morning. Nothing really changed, but you're really getting juiced hard on Alt.
Plus 280.
Or to go under 7.5, I think
It's now minus 360.
Wow.
Minus 360 at DraftKings. So I like, that's kind of one that, it sort of ran away. You have a couple of cracks at it in the top 7. with your, with Tennessee. But what I was saying before is it's not always bad to lay these numbers, but it does get to a point, and this is the idea of the numbers getting so big. I don't have anything that's greater than minus 350. There's just so much uncertainty. I mean, if it goes 4 quarterbacks and 3 receivers, there's your 7, and you lose minus 360. Not really interested in it. So that was one where it got away. So I have the alt, as we talked about earlier, the bet about being the first lineman. And if I was going to lay big money, I don't even know now, he's minus 600. I'd probably lay 600. He's the first offensive lineman rather than under 7.5. Because if the first lineman goes outside of that, you're still alive. And if he's the first, he could be the first offensive lineman outside of the top 7. But if he goes in the top 7, he's probably also going to win that first offensive line bet.
Yeah.
I think that when we get down here, though, the one that's interesting to me is Dallas Turner. He was, I think, 8.5, and then jumped to 9.5, and the over is still getting juiced.
Yeah.
I think on DraftKings I saw it at 160.
Yep.
And it leads me to 2 thoughts on this that I'm curious to know what you guys feel about an actionable bet right now. So, Andrew, we're looking at the over-under draft positions, but I don't know if you can quickly click to the odds to be a top 10 pick. My thought here is you could bet Dallas Turner over, and that gives you a lot of options to have other players pop in there. So you're not counting, obviously, on any specific player, but like we talked about, if you're going to get 3 quarterbacks, 3 receivers, an offensive lineman, let's just say I feel like you're running out of space for Dallas Turner, and you're only laying minus 160. That's pretty good. My other thought that occurred to me last night was you have Murphy and Latu, 2 really good defensive linemen that are, I think, likely to be the ones that push into the top 10 and cause Turner to fall out. So Murphy is plus 210 to be a top 10 pick, and Latu is plus 170. Again, that's as of last night. So my thought is, what if you bet both of them to go in the top 10? I think your clear greatest likelihood is you get one or the other, and that's profitable. You made some money. You're also, I think, more likely, and I want to see if you guys agree, more likely to get both than you are to get neither in the top 10. Now, maybe that's close. I could see a scenario where they both don't go in the top 10 and you lose, and I could also see a scenario where they both get picked, especially with if some of the teams that are currently there kind of trade in and out. But I could see Atlanta and Chicago. It's pretty narrow, but I think that my thought is, even if you call the chances that they both go and the chances that neither go even, all of the greatest chance is that one or the other is a top 10 pick.
Yeah.
And that's profitable. You make money on that. So your thoughts on, because that's something people could do right now. So I'm curious what you think of that.
No, I think that's sound logic. I don't know if I would bet on both versus neither, because really in the top 10, I can't see the Jets going defense. Like, the only 2 teams that I think could are Atlanta, who's kind of locked into doing that, and maybe Chicago. But it seems like every other team in the top 10 is pretty much locked on taking an offensive player. I don't know.
I would agree with that. That we're probably only going to see that one defensive player go in the top 10 for multiple reasons, that people aren't that high on these defenders, and there's a lot of talent at wide receiver and offensive line stuffed in there ahead of if there is a fourth quarterback that goes in the top 10, there's just going to be too many spots.
Yeah.
So then is the best bet, which this is one that I made. I wish I got 8.5, obviously, but I did take Turner over 9.5. MGM had 150 and DraftKings had 160. So I laid it with that because that's certainly where the heat was going. I think that as Latu was rising, that he became first it was even, then he became the inched ahead at one book as the odds-on favorite for Atlanta's pick. I recalled Andrew's discussion. I don't remember the gentleman's name, but the guy that was the reporter for the Falcons,
Jeff.
Jeff, yep. that was a lot of what he was saying even back then. That that he was saying they might take Latu even back then. That they really like him, and that the pick wasn't likely to be Dallas Turner. So I think that the unders. I really like Latu under 16 and a half. You got a lot of shots. It's again minus 182, but you have a lot of shots at that. So you're pricing it in about a 60% chance that he goes in the first 16 picks. That's not a small window. You have a lot of shots at that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe 5 or 6 reasonable teams that he could wind up with. So my thought on what drew me to taking both of those guys in the top 10 was just the idea that maybe Murphy might be the guy that Atlanta's looking at. They don't have the draft. I
don't know that Murphy's gonna, because Atlanta's moving to 3-4, and I don't know if Murphy would fit that like zero technique role. Just given that
he would not.
They already have Jarrett, who's kind of undersized. So
right.
I don't know. I could see Murphy to Chicago though. But
yeah, and that's what I was thinking is, if you get them both, you got a home run. Get one or the other, you make some money. Because adding Murphy was more of a hedge to Latu because he's the guy I really started getting pretty juiced about last night. And I know, again, I was a little bit late to the party because RC, you wrote the glowing scouting report on him. I interpreted Ross's comments as welcome to the party 2 months late. But what got me was when you look at, I think it was DraftKings, FanDuel, but not DraftKings yet. They did post offensive and defensive rookie of the year odds, and Latu was the favorite, plus 700.
Wow! Is
and
that in
DraftKings
futures?
Kindly asked me to stop betting it. They wouldn't even, and then I tried to sneak in a parlay. Defensive rookie of the year and the Celtics to win the Eastern Conference. I think it got to like 9 or 10 to 1, and they said my limit on that was $0. So they shut me down. But
you can't lose that bet then.
I don't think it's. I don't think DraftKings has put it up yet, but it's FanDuel.
No, it's up here, Chris. D-Roy Latu plus 750.
So that's even better. So my plan. Because there's a DraftKings and a FanDuel physical location within shouting distance of me. They don't always have the same bets that you can have on the app because I really think they like to track who's doing what. But I think I'm going to be able to hit both of those. Draft night, I'll be at Mohegan Sun, and they have a FanDuel. So I'd like to get a couple of more cracks at that because my thought on it was if Latu winds up with Atlanta, that's a team that's going to be pretty high profile. We don't know the schedule, but my guess is maybe it's not as extreme as Micah Parsons because he went to the Cowboys, but Atlanta's going to get some primetime games. The Cousins thing was a pretty big splash. The team is pretty good. They have a really good chance of winning that division, so they're going to be a playoff team who's in the mix. And if he's starring on the Falcons, it's not going to be lost on the NFL writers for a defensive rookie of the year. And a lot of times we talked about this being a chalky award. If he goes to Atlanta, that is probably going to make him the first defensive player drafted.
Yep.
That's a pretty good place to start for Defensive Rookie of the Year. So I actually took it last night. I hit that a couple times. I did first defensive player drafted for Latu, under 16.5. I really kind of, and so first defensive player, but then also first defensive lineman drafted. So these are plus odds. Latu in the top 10 picks, plus 170. So as we're talking about bets, not just recapping stuff that I have, RC, maybe you want to talk a little bit about how you feel about the player, because, and the situation, as a matter of fact. I think those are bets that are available right now for anyone to jump on if they agree with the line of thinking.
I'm not sure what you said, because I went out and was betting a lot too for Defensive Rookie of the Year. But I did this. Now consider this. Get ready to click your betting machine if you agree. So Latu's plus 750. You have it up there on the board. So I put a couple bucks on Latu to win Defensive Rookie of the Year. It makes total sense if I look at the first 5-6 names that are up there. Latu's so much better than anyone on that list. It's not even worth having a conversation about. So only injury could stop him from beating this top group of names, to me. Verse, if he landed perfectly and Latu didn't, that would be about the only. If you lean towards the sack guys getting the award, it's not going to be Dallas. I don't think Dallas Turner will be a big sack guy unless he's in a specific system where they want him sneak rushing the passer. He's very weak when he hits contact. He has to sneak attack to get into the backfield. He's a good all-around outside linebacker, but he does not belong in the conversation with Latu and Verse for pass rushers. And then Latu's just better than all of them. So the Latu thing makes sense. It will not be Byron Murphy. I don't even think Byron Murphy's really that good. It won't be Chop Robinson, who may put up a big 0 for sacks his rookie season.
But RC, who could be an out of nowhere player?
Well, I took a hedge because I saw the odds when I was scanning the board. I was looking at big odds. Who's the one guy that will be an instant starter, but with that is in a position where he's going to put up numbers? Like Darius Robinson, I really like, but he's not going to put up numbers. He is not likely to put up numbers with the way that he's going to be used. If Nate Wiggins gets whoever he gets drafted by, if he gets thrown into the starting lineup, I think he's going to be a problem. But he's not going to put up big numbers to get your attention. There's one guy on this board that I think is going to get tackles, sacks. He is the threat in a different way than Latu, and that is plus 3,500 Peyton Wilson.
Huh. Okay.
As an instant outside linebacker starter that could get 100+ tackles easily, but also get 7-8 sacks, maybe picks off a pass, or he has the kind of athleticism, scoop and score a fumble. He could get a defensive touchdown. So I was going to ask Ross, but I figured he would get it, and I see it in the chat. He's on that.
Yeah.
On that train.
Yeah.
Jonah Ellis. I don't know that Jonah Ellis, who I really like too.
Plus 6,000.
He's worth if you're betting big on Latu, that'd be maybe throwing a buck or two. Jonah Ellis might be the second most talented pure pass rusher in this draft. But he's potentially going to he'll be drafted 3rd round most likely. could get drafted to a team that already has established guys on it. But Peyton Wilson, I think, gets drafted and he's starting week 1.
Yeah. RC, let's also do this for the offensive rookies too, because I think there could be some good opportunity there, especially if we think that the QB class is weaker in this draft and they might not throw up stats. Like, is it possible for someone like Neighbors plus 800 to sneak in there, grab the offensive rookie of the year, or a random, the rookie wide receiver class is deep. Could somebody like a Brian Thomas or Ladd McConkey take this because their landing spot would be much better than someone like Neighbors or Harrison?
As I'm scanning it, I haven't looked at the offensive route. I didn't even know that they were up, so I'm glad that you pointed it out. There's one name that stands out to me for offensive rookie of the year in a not obvious way. Jaden Daniels is more on the obvious side, but at plus 800, those are pretty good
priced
odds.
In, yeah.
But I'll ask Ross is playing along in the chat. Who would be if I told you that Jaden Daniels didn't get rookie of the year because he got hurt? Let's just say he gets hurt, he gets himself taken out. Ross, who is the obvious rookie of the year among all of the rest of the group, if you assume it's not going to be a quarterback? I'll give him a second. And,
yeah, we're on delay.
Andrew, do you see? What would your answer be?
It's a stretch, but this is just purely landing spot. I think Ladd McConkey is going to catch on to like Buffalo or KC, and he's just going to get so many targets that I could see him at plus 4,500 coming in and taking that if it's not a QB. But it's a stretch.
I just bet $5 on my guy. So, and I only bet that little amount when it's big odds, just adding it to the basket. And there's a reason why I'm not going any heavier than that now.
The other one that I like too, and it really, again, I bet you all of these odds are going to shift dramatically once we see landing spots. But one of my favorite receivers in this draft is Brian Thomas. So if he can link on with a great QB too, I could see him throwing up crazy numbers.
RC, was your guy Joe Alt at 300 to 1?
No, just short of that. I just put $5 down on Trey Benson at plus 4,000.
The running back.
Because there's going to be so many wide receivers. Whoever Dallas gets, in theory, if Dallas drafts a running back to be their new guy, that guy's going to be an insta starter. And if he's on a high-profile team like Dallas is one of the obvious places that a running back is going to get drafted because they're the ones with a wide-open opportunity. And if they draft him, it'll probably be the first running back taken, and it'll be by Dallas, who has the space, who has the spot ready, willing, and able for what they'll say is their next Emmitt Smith. That guy's going to start right away, and you got the full starting running back on the Dallas Cowboys, high-profile team that's going to take all the touches.
So I'll say a couple things about these types of bets that I like to. I think it's good advice. One is if you are going to bet $20 on a guy, do two $10 bets. Or if you're going to do whatever, you're break it down into smaller pieces. And the reason is they will give you sometimes a cash out option, and it's nice to have the flexibility to give yourself the option to do a partial cash out. Let's just say you have a guy who's looking really good and they're paying out 75% of the bet, but we're only halfway through the season, so obviously there's some injury risk. I'm thinking Micah Parsons style. You can cash out one of the bets, pretty much get a profit and let the rest ride. That's one thing that I think is important. The other thing is I think it's good to take note of these sleeper players, and as RC said, throw a little bit on them. But also, these are kind of, this all unfolds in slow motion. So you could, if you also chose to pick your guy, and let's say you don't hedge anything, when these guys have good performances, their odds are going to drop, but still to a point where a 35-1 guy is going to become 4-1 or something like that. So you really do, if you think about getting a 7-1, you have 4 guys that you can hedge at a similar price and still be good. So I think that there's a risk to spreading it out too early. Kind of just wait to see. There's going to be injuries. There's going to be players that even come out of nowhere and surprise us, like Nakua last year. If we were going to spread out among 7 guys, we wouldn't have covered the Nakua space. There would be no chips on Puka Nakua. So I think that's the advice I would give is, that there is some volatility in the markets. Every little thing that happens, they things move around, but you do have time to react to these markets. It's what makes them so fun. Like, it's really, you get your money's worth, because it's incredibly fun to play these long-term futures, and they can be profitable. We've hit on a few of them.
Yeah, no, I like it because you track a player all season. They are a lot of fun. RC, I wanted to flip one more question back to you. You talked about Benson, but what about Blake Corum potentially even going to the Chargers, and they're going to run the ball a lot? Do you see him as translating well in the next level?
I don't think he has the juice to be an offensive rookie of the year. And if he gets drafted by the Chargers, which is the favorite odds to happen, he splits with Gus Edwards. So, and Gus Edwards takes the touchdown portion, so it's going to make Corum very much less exciting of a player. Where my Benson theory is, he and the reason I'm just starting out slow is I don't know that that's what Dallas is going to do. If it's not Dallas, whatever running back Dallas selects, whether it's Brooks or Benson or Corum or Wright, their odds, whatever odds there are right now, is going to be chopped in half and then some once Dallas takes them. So I'm hedging my bets that Dallas doesn't take Trey Benson, and then I'm taking my chances that he lands poorly and is a member of a split. There's only really Dallas as the place where the running back starting job is wide open, waiting for that guy to hit. Injuries will force others, but as we know it right now, the team that's drafting for a week 1 starter, I think it's only Dallas.
And whoever lands on Dallas is going to get cut in half, these odds, the day after the draft. So whichever running back it is, I think you get your 40-1s, 20-1. That it's going to be recognized immediately. So it almost, with that in mind, if you can, it is a good idea to put a little on a running back if that's the way you're thinking, because those odds are just by the function of getting drafted by Dallas, they're going to shift in a big way.
And I think there's going to be, in my make-believe world, football world in my head, the Cowboys draft Benson because I think he's the best running back in this draft. And that's not a radical claim. I think most NFL general managers have Benson as the top running back. But being it's the Dallas job with so many eyes on the Dallas situation and it being the best opportunity, but I think the little extra juice, if they take let's say they take Braylon Allen, and maybe other teams jump in ahead and take a Benson or Brooks ahead. If Dallas winds up Braylon Allen, his odds will then get chopped in half. But if they take Braylon Allen, they'll go, ooh, this is their Derrick Henry type running back. If they take Jonathan Brooks, they'll go, ooh, this is like a Tony Pollard. This is like their Alvin Kamara. And those are all good things or play. But when they take Trey Benson, I think they'll start saying this is their Emmitt Smith. He reminds me of a bigger Emmitt Smith. So I just think the story is going to build around Trey Benson if it happens. Ross is talking about Tyrone Tracy as a long shot for Offensive Rookie of the Year. I think Tyrone Tracy sucks as a running back, so I am not playing that. One quick thing. I'm surprised Ross did not bring up Estime as Offensive Rookie of the Year potential. He could be the one that ends up landing right at plus 10,000. Could be a little interesting. Um, I, my thoughts on betting this, and after hearing all that we've heard, I'm thankful for. I'm always thankful for these discussions because then I end up betting things I didn't have on my board going into it. So I appreciate the conversation on it. My only wrap up thing is to throw it to Chris and say, Chris, is there anything that you bet that you have an interest in that didn't get discussed? Everything, most of my stuff is surrounding neighbors in one way or the other, or bets that we made as we were talking about it. My only one that we haven't talked about is I think Penix is going in the first round. Ross vehemently denies that. We have a side bet on that, that Penix goes in the first for me. He says no. But I don't see a lot of great ways to bet that Penix goes in the first round, and the odds are changing on that fast. Yeah. So okay. So it's up there. When I was looked a day or two ago, they didn't even have him um, on there as a first round option, or I just missed it. So Penix was the only thing we didn't talk about that's kind of bettable, something I would look to bet. But Chris, is there any player or bet situation that we didn't talk about that you have to wrap us up with?
Yeah, and I think really the one bet, maybe two bets, and it was really like we talked about before, the position of the first pick for a particular team. And what I like about it is a trade doesn't completely knock you out. And maybe I'm just riding my high from last year, having the running back for the Lions bail me out of a betting draft. But the one that I did, well, a couple that I did bet, but the one we didn't talk about was the Jets and their first pick being a tight end. And, Bowers, obviously. So I think that what I heard this week that I thought was interesting is Mike Jurecki is a Cardinals beat reporter, and it was a guest on the show talking about Walter Football. The website keeps track of predictions for some of these beat writers, and there's some with woeful records. But this guy, Mike Jurecki from the Cardinals, is 14-0 based on what they've been tracking, and he put up a picture of Bowers and Gronkowski and said, the guy on the right is going to be a Jet. So it was kind of at plus one. so that was one of those things where I thought about it and said, if I was a Jets, am I taking a tight end? I mean, really, since Bubba Franks, Aaron Rodgers hasn't even had a tight end. So what do they care if he has a tight end? But it seems like
Michael Finley,
some heat there. Yeah, well, believe me, every year the guy broke my heart. So I think as I'm looking, I think it's a little tricky with the needle in the haystack type things. But if you can see the need of the team and a plentiful position. And then tight end is not a plentiful position, but where the Jets are, it's not likely Bowers is not available. So they're going to have a crack at him. So at plus odds, I think if you have the Jets and then take the Bengals defensive line plus 230 and make some reasonable bets there. I laid it with Buffalo, as I said, minus 250 with the wide receiver. But I kind of think that's the only thing that we didn't touch on that I did bet. And I like those bets because it keeps you, as I said, it keeps you in the game. If they trade up or down, you still just have to hit the position. So I feel like with a basket of those, you could have some fun and make some money. Those are the three that I have in my notes. And I just didn't have the time to pour through every team. But Bills, Bengals, and Jets are the positions that I bet so far.
Have you bet the Green Bay Philadelphia game yet? The only game that has odds listed on DraftKings.
Well, I said in our comments we were doing, I like the over, but I haven't bet it yet. No, in fact, there was an over-under. One of them has 50. I think that might be DraftKings, but I think FanDuel has 48.5. So if you like the over, shop around.
Way too early for that, guys.
Yeah, DraftKings is 50.
Okay, yeah, then FanDuel is 48.5 on the opening game.
Yeah.
I got to think, they're going to be playing at, where are they playing? Elevation.
Brazil.
They're in Brazil. I'm just assuming Elevation. Am I right? Is that going to be
I have no idea. We got to do some homework on the geography, though. We got some time.
Yeah.
But Wayne, the Eagles have all of these great Georgia defensive tackles. Are the Eagles gonna win 50-0? Is that what you're betting? I mean, the Eagles defense is going to be so good, like it was last year.
Vic Fangio is going to whip them in shape, but not by week 1.
Did it bang? I don't know who was worse, the Eagles defense in the second half of the season, or Vic Fangio anytime Jalen Ramsey wasn't not in existence.
Yeah, I'm certainly, as a huge Vic Fangio fan, I'm definitely open to the idea that he's, it's not the 1990s anymore.
Yeah. Well, okay. I think this is a good stopping point, guys. Thank you, everyone on the stream, for your comments and watching along. We'll be back Thursday night to live stream the draft, get live reactions from RC and the rest of the FF Metrics crew. And just let us know if you guys have any feedback that you didn't throw in the comments. Just feel free to email RC and we'll try to, take that and keep improving this. But for now, we're out. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, RC.